Yeah, Bickley and Murata Mornings continues here on Arizona Sports, the local sports leader. It is our pleasure to be joined on set here at Media Row for Super Bowl 57 by a man who's got a Super Bowl ring on as we speak. The head coach of the Super Bowl 35 champion Baltimore Ravens, Brian Billick, joins us on set. Coach, good morning.
Thank you for having me. This
Hello,
is great.
Brian. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Super Bowl's got to be a special time for you, and we'll get to all that. But you are here on behalf of X-Tech, and tell us about what X-Tech is all about.
Well, I've been with X-Tech Pad from the beginning when Broderick approached me 10 years ago. I was intrigued by the potential of X-Tech pads, and that being that the game has changed so much in terms of the technologies from when we train and prepare physically and mentally with the players. And, of course, we've taken the head out of the game, which is a priority of the NFL in particular. Well, that just makes pads all that much more important. Mm-hmm. And pads hadn't changed in 40 years until now, and the technology has allowed us to put together, it's the best pad. It's the most used pad in all of football, pro football, college football. It's getting that way in high school, working our way down to the youth level even. It's in the old days, big guys had big pads and little guys had little pads, and that was it.
Right.
That is
Yeah.
true.
Now, it's like everything is just individually fitted to the degree it has to do with your height, your weight, your injury history, the position you play, your experience level, as it should be, to basically form-fit the pads to give you the ultimate protection, and that's why it's the number one pad in football.
All right, now as a Super Bowl winning head coach, you know the process very well. What are these teams feeling right now as the game draws near?
Well, it's interesting. Wednesday is the first day that there's kind of normalcy. The off week and getting everything together organizationally and tickets and travel and wherever he's going to be and grandma and grandpa and the whole 9 yards. And then you get down here and media day on Monday and Tuesday and just everything that is the NFL and the Super Bowl. But Wednesday, you get back on the field. And now as a coach, this is where you try to bring it back to a sense of normalcy for the rest of the week. That the guys, even though the ramifications and the stage is so much bigger, this is just a game. And we can do this. We know how to do this. And it begins with your preparation on Wednesday, all the way through Friday. Actually, Friday after the last practice until game day is the longest period of time in your life, because you try to keep your players engaged, but you try not to wear them out, and keeping that balance between everything that's going on around them and keeping their focus on the task at hand.
Now, I covered your Super Bowl, and I remember during that week how combative the Ravens were, and you were at the front of that with the media, because the media, they all wanted to get to Ray. They all wanted to get into that story, and you very wisely took all the attention of them and took all of that yourself. Do you remember that? What do you recall
when
of
I
that?
called them ambulance chasers? You think that?
Yes,
think that
I
did
do
it?
remember that.
Well, you remember, we had dealt with that all year long.
Yeah.
Since the Ray Lewis incident the year before. In training camp, we made Ray available and answered all the questions he possibly could. And as a team said, okay, now we're moving forward. But, of course, during the course of the season, every time we went on the road, every Sunday morning, you'd get up, have your coffee, you'd open the paper, and there's a picture of Ray Lewis in the orange jumpsuit and reliving the whole thing. And we did that all year long and got to the end of the year that said, okay, been there, done that. We've said absolutely everything that you possibly can. And then on the way down here that night before, a piece was run by Jeremy Schaap that I thought was a cheap shot that regurgitated it all back up. And I thought, okay, this is what they plan on doing. I got up in front of the media that first interview and said, look, you're not qualified and we're not going to do it. We're here to play football. Because we've done the other. It's not like we've hidden from it. It's not like we haven't answered the questions.
Right.
So they didn't much care for that. but it served its
It was
purpose.
something.
And our players kept their focus, and the outcome was pretty good.
It was a great move.
Brian Billick, our guest here on Arizona Sports. And then you went out on that Sunday and absolutely just annihilated the Giants. I still think competitively one of the most mismatched Super Bowls of all time. But I was watching part of the 30 for 30 on your team, which was fantastic, by the way. And to see the event with all the players back together where they got a lot of footage, I didn't quite remember or recall, Coach, that your team was a quote machine. Just with yourself, with Shannon Sharp, with Ray Lewis, with Tony Siragusa.
Terrell Suggs was later. I keep wanting to put him on your team.
I always say that team had a lot of characters, but we had a lot of character too. That's why we agreed to do Hard Knocks the next year, to let people see. Because, again, we were perceived, whether it was because coming off the Ray Lewis situation, the fact that we were so dominant defensively, that bully mentality, that's how people thought of us. And there were a lot of characters, but it was a team that rallied around that. As they always used to say, if you can't talk it, you're not going to walk it, you know, and so they backed it up. And they had a lot of passion for it. And it wasn't necessarily aimed at anybody, or it just was their passion, and they wore it on their sleeves and had a great time with it. And obviously it served the purpose of that team very well.
Yeah, and the Shannon Sharp quotes from the sideline, the footage that was in the 30 for 30. We said it, now what are you going to do? But the best one of all was locker room post the Tennessee game where you made the speech, hey, you got to give your good opponent credit. Now shut the cameras off. And what followed was legendary.
It was such a rivalry, and it was a great rivalry.
Yeah.
You know, obviously the Pittsburgh rivalry was the number one thing in Baltimore all those years. But you got to remember, they were in our division back then. That was the old AFC Central, and along with what is now the AFC North, we also had Tennessee and Jacksonville.
Yes. And
Tennessee, we were both good at the same time, so you knew you were going to cost one another, and we had some great battles, and they didn't like the fact that we could come in that year and beat them the first time they had ever had a loss in Adelphi Stadium, and they didn't speak well of it.
Yeah. And
our guys loved that, so we came back and they were the best team in football, as anointed by Sports Illustrated, and they were. You know, they had 13-3 or whatever. Our guys loved that. They relished it and stepped up to the task.
And to your credit, you didn't suppress that team's personality. All right, you've spent some time in the Valley. You're aware of the Cardinals and what they're going through. We're going through a head coaching search here. Yeah. How much is our quarterback, Kyler Murray, an impediment for a coach who might want to come into Arizona? Is he an impediment?
No, I don't think it is. Every year when we get into the coaching carousel, I'm always asked, well, how do you rate these jobs? Well, what you're really saying is, how do I rate these quarterbacks?
Yeah.
Because that's really the difference in terms of where a team is right now. And it's no coincidence that Sean Payton took a job with Russell Wilson. All that those that believe maybe he's on the back end of it, I still think he can play. If you have a choice, it's usually going to be based around, do I have the quarterback? Because this is a league that if you either have a quarterback or you're in the process of getting a quarterback. I think Kyler Murray obviously has shown he can be a dynamic talent. It's got to be structured in the right way. The team has got to be put around him. And just you're looking at a team in the Philadelphia Eagles and the Kansas City Chiefs. That the key to their success, and you got to give Andy Reid and Coach Solana the credit for it, is they've wrapped a team around the unique talents of their quarterback and have matched that. And that's going to be the job, whoever takes the job. And I think Kyler Murray is a dynamic talent. We've seen that. But it's got to be structured, and the right team has to be wrapped around him, and that's going to be the challenge.
My partner mentioned your time in the Valley. That includes a consultant job under Herm Edwards with Arizona State football. Admittedly, you came into Arizona State football at a weird time. Yeah. How would you describe your experience with the Sun Devil program?
It was, obviously my relationship with Herm and Ray Anderson. Ray was my agent years and years ago, before going into the league office and then coming down to Arizona State. And because they were going through this transition, and they had brought Marvin Lewis in, who had worked for me in Baltimore, in a similar capacity. They needed to do it because of what was going on the offensive side. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed being around the players. I loved experiencing that and seeing where it is. I will say this. Football needs some major adjustment.
We are in agreement.
Somebody in charge, maybe?
Yes, somebody needs to reckon. I loved Mike Krzyzewski, when after the Final Four last year, given the stature that he had, basically said, "Guys, this is screwed up. This is you got to get this." And I don't know who's going to do it. That balance between what the players should have the right to do, but that balance between the NIL money and the portal, and you've got, because right now I'm fearful of what it's going to do to college football and the way it's trickling down. It needs to be brought under control.
Coach, thanks so much for stopping by. I want to give you an opportunity again to mention X-Tech equipment. For people who might be listening, parents who have kids in high school football want to get the best in equipment. How can they do that?
xtechpads.com. You can look at it online. All the major programs, as I said before, the best attribute I can give to it. I've got 2 grandsons that are playing the game, young kids, and they're going. When we can get it down into the use, they're going to have X-Tech. It is the best protection for our players in this great game, a game that is physical and can be violent at times. We need to protect them. X-Tech pads is the way to do it. xtechpads.com.